The prospect of owning a Bentley Continental, either as the two-door GT or the four-door Flying Spur, is a very tempting one. And take it from me as somebody who did buy one, a Flying Spur in particular, it does offer a lot to love, but there are definitely some things which I don't love so much about them. So I wanted to make this video to help out other potential owners from my experiences, and of course, for my fellow owners or former owners, be sure to drop your experiences, warnings, good points, bad points, all down below in the comments for other people to read as well. And if you're interested in checking out more videos like this, I've actually done this same kind of thing for my other cars, Quattroporte, Jag XKR, even V10 Touareg. So let's start off with a positive. The first one is obvious, but it goes from being knowing it on paper to really experiencing this cool aspect in practice. And that is the feel and the panache. I mean this in two ways. The first thing is when you sit in a Bentley, two-door, four-door, doesn't really matter, it feels like a tank. Everything just feels so solid and heavy and sturdy. It really is like a modern interpretation of an old, massive British luxury car, but with a far better level of build quality, fit and finish. You do kind of feel unstoppable in a Bentley. Now, the panache side of things is more other people enjoying the car. And that was the thing that surprised me the most about owning one, and that is that despite having two Maseratis and a Jag XKR before it, all of which I would say are, on paper at least, sexier cars, I got far more compliments about this Bentley, and far more strangers coming up and talking to me about it than any of those did, which really shocked me. So it's not the most important advantage or upside in the world, but it's definitely something which I would say was a highlight. The first downside is probably the most obvious one on the list, and it's one which most people will be at least worried about, if not put off completely, but I'm actually putting a bit of a spin on it because it's not the problem that you think it's going to be. Repairs. But I'm not talking about cost. That's the weird thing. See, there are a lot of ways that you can get around the costs on a Bentley legitimately. The biggest one being if you're willing to work on it yourself. In my case, I did a number of things to mine myself, such as changing the battery in the boot. But even then, the actual problem is not the cost of parts, which are about the same as in my Maserati. It's not necessarily the problems themselves being ridiculously complex on paper. It's that everything, and I mean everything, on a Bentley is awkward to work on. It's 17 feet long, 7 feet wide, 3 tons. It's a massive car, and yet behind every panel, every door, every latch, every catch, there is something there. There's no empty space. That's why it's so heavy. They filled the car with tech, and crucially, electronics, and that tends to be where the problems pop up. For example, in mine, when I changed the battery myself, it was a pain in the ass to get just the battery out of the boot. One of the 2 batteries, mind you. There are fuse boxes in the boot, by the steering wheel, under the bonnet. There are electrical gubbins under passenger seats which can get waterlogged and then start causing all kinds of havoc, which is exactly what happened with mine. And problems which are just caused by having a bit of debris build up in the scuttle by the windshield, or the windscreen for us in the UK. It's a fundamental design flaw, and some of the things on these cars are kind of just broken from the factory. Smaller things which are just known to go wrong, like tyre pressure sensors. They're things which are just an annoyance to work on. Those kind of things that will never be quite right, no matter how hard you try, and you need to be prepared for that. Take a prime example. Mine needed a new side light bulb. That's, according to Bentley, a 4-hour bumper-off job. That's ridiculous. No matter how much money you have, it's more about the principle at that point. So it's definitely something that you'll want to keep in mind. Can you work on it yourself? Absolutely. But you might end up hating the car. To move back to the good stuff though, the next one is the performance. And I mean in 2 particular ways. One is the way in which it delivers its straight line performance, all of that nearly 200 miles an hour of potential, even in the non-speed form. But then actually the more surprising one is actually the cornering. And that was what I was so happy about because it really reminded me of the also Volkswagen built, of course, Touareg V10 that I used to have. That thing is so much better through corners than it ever has any right to be, and so is a Flying Spur, or even more so the 2-door GT. These are obscenely heavy, very large vehicles by either limo or GT car standards, and yet they can take corners like absolute monsters. This thing weighs over a ton more than a Nissan GTR, and yet In two-door or four-door form, it's so reminiscent of that kind of experience. It's not as quick, just to be clear, of course, but it's that kind of vibe, that big Godzilla-esque, just roll over everything in your path kind of approach to performance. And in a straight line, yes, it's a 200-mile-an-hour car, but it's not a face-ripping, tire-squealing, shrieking engine kind of performance. It's more the kind of performance which feels like you're wrapping up the tarmac beneath the wheels like a carpet and throwing an anchor to the horizon and pulling it closer kind of performance. It feels almost like you're driving a meteor, and it's wonderful. But we need to go into the less than stellar side again for the next downside, and this is an obvious one alongside repairs, the one which a lot of people will be thinking about, and you're justified in doing so: the fuel. Now, it's obvious to say that it's not the most economical thing around, but it's actually kind of good and bad at the same time. It's good as long as you take it out on long, high-speed highway, for our American friends, or motorway runs. It's an autobahn eater, in other words. If you're up at high speeds, you'll get 25, 26 to the gallon out of it, and with a big tank, the range is pretty good. But then if you take it around town for groceries, you'll be getting more like 10, 12 to the gallon, at least from my experience, and I wasn't exactly flooring it everywhere and would very rarely even put it into sport mode. So yes, you may be aware that it uses a lot of fuel, but I can confirm it does indeed use a lot of fuel. The next good point, though, is another fairly obvious one, but especially in the case of the one which I chose, the, I would say, less attractive and certainly less popular four-door Flying Spur, which to this day I'm still glad that I bought over the two-door, for this exact reason: the sheer space. I mean, they are big and they are heavy, but at least you get the payoff of so much space. Now, with the two-door GT, or, the convertible version, the rear seats aren't quite as good, but for GT standards, they're really good. The main reason why I got rid of my old Jag XKR is because the rear seats were just useless, and the boot space, although it looked pretty good, did get full up pretty quick, even with just normal grocery shopping. In the case of a Bentley, the first time I opened the boot, it was amazing. It was like a throwback to some massive old 50s Cadillac, where you could fit about 17 bodies in the back. Then the rear seats, they're huge. It feels like a long wheelbase variation, even if you don't technically choose that. I was going to use mine as a wedding car for that exact reason, and don't even get me started on the driver's space, because of course it's never an issue. The headroom, legroom, width room, it's got more than enough for pretty much anyone. Next, though, of course, we go back over to the negative side, and this one actually ties in once again to the repair side, but it's actually the other side of the coin. Except the problem with the Bentley is both sides of the coin are bad. As I mentioned earlier on, everything is awkward to work on, but then the payoff to that, which makes it even worse, is that if you don't have the time to work on it yourself, or even just the inclination, or the competence, or the confidence, well, then of course the only other option that you have is either to take it to Bentley, which is going to be very expensive, or you can try and find a garage or a mechanic who can do it for you. Therein lies the problem, finding someone who's even willing to work on it. And then you have to worry about if someone seems too willing to work on it. Do they really know what they're doing? It's a fine line with a Bentley because, yes, it uses a lot of Volkswagen tech. It shares parts with the Phaeton from Volkswagen, the A8 from Audi, and you can even plug VAGCOM in it to check the codes. Although, as far as I've heard, it's not 100% accurate. So yes, there is a lot of carryover, but you need to know that the person who's working on it is both competent enough to do so, but also confident enough that they're not scared off. So in other words, it's just a potentially awkward car to keep in the best condition. Shifting back over, though, to the negative side for the final point, this one is actually, I would say, pretty crucial to the purchasing choice. And this is one particular area which I didn't really think through enough. See, I use my cars, I would say, semi-regularly. I don't use them every day, and I don't tend to drive ridiculously long distances, with the majority of my work being done on YouTube from home. So my car is a grocery getter, and it's for fun. It's not a motorway miles eater unless I'm going to review a car, which does happen, as I said, semi-regularly. That's the problem. When you have a Bentley, to be in the best condition, they need to be doing a lot of miles. And that's the main reason why most Continentals that you see for sale have a lot of miles on them. They are fantastic if you, for instance, have a really long commute on the motorway every day. It's a perfect car for that, because that's exactly what the car needs to be doing for two reasons. One, it's more reliable when you're doing that, and two, you're getting the best economy while you're doing that. So it's perfect. It's literally in the name, Continental. The downside is if you own it as someone like me who uses it every other day or every 3 days to do maybe a 10-15 mile drive. That's just not enough for the car, and it's not fair on the car. So if you're going to be doing low miles, I would actually recommend either not buying one at all or investing in ways to keep the car in good condition when you're not using it. For example, it's essential to have a garage, which unfortunately I don't, hence the water ingress issue. And secondly, you absolutely need a trickle charger for the battery, as pretty much any owner on the Bentley forums or clubs will attest to. So ultimately, that's it for my thoughts on my favourite points and my most hated points about my time owning a Flying Spur. I guess the ultimate question is, would I buy another Bentley again? Well, that's an interesting one, because if you'd have asked me back in 2019, 2020, would I ever buy another Quattroporte, I'd have said absolutely not. Yet fast forward to 2021 and I bought a second one, and I'm so glad that I did, because it was 1,000 times better. So maybe I will get another Bentley of some kind in the future. For the moment though, I would say I probably wouldn't get another one the same. Not only because of the disadvantages which I had, but also because it's just not really my style to go for the same car twice. So if I did ever get another Bentley, I think it would probably be if I had significantly more money to spend, and it would probably end up being something like a Bentayga, just to really shake it up. Ultimately though, that's it for my thoughts on owning one. I hope that this will benefit at least some of you. But until next time, I'll see you then, and for now, as always, thanks for watching.